Part 181. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1801. The girl was slightly startled when she heard the security guard's words. Then he placed his eyes on me and continued to look at me. That's right. How can he know yin and yang at such a young age? The girl looked at me and said. Then he opened his satchel and took out a large bill from his pocket and handed it to me. Take the money and leave, don't come here to cause trouble. The corner of my mouth twitched slightly as I looked at the large stack of banknotes that the girl handed me. The Long family is really rich. I just came here to show off and give you this much money. It's so easy to make money. I didn't reach out to take the banknote handed over by the girl, but instead said, Miss, have you ever heard that judging a book by its appearance will lead to loss? The girl was startled and replied, I've heard of it. I smiled and said, whether I have the ability or not to understand yin and yang is not decided by you or him, but by me. When the girl saw what I said, she became very interested. Oh. From what you said, you are very confident in your strength. I said half jokingly, I can't say confidence. If I dare to say that I am number one in this world, no one will dare to say that I am number two. The girl was startled and couldn't help but say, you are similar in age to me, but what you say is so arrogant. I want to see what you are capable of. Arrogant. This is really not arrogance. My moral conduct is extremely high now, and even though I am a mortal, I am as good as a god. Moreover, I also have the god list, the divine whip, 4 divine swords and various abilities. There is no one in the world today who can compare with me. The girl crossed her arms across her chest and looked at me with raised eyebrows and said, come on, show me your hands and let me see what you are capable of. I nodded and looked at the girl's pretty face. I stared at the girl for a long time, and the girl blushed at my sight. She said coquettishly, I asked you to show your hands, why do you always stare at me? I smiled and said, of course I want to see your face. The girl asked curiously, what did you see? I replied, your name is Long Shuang Shuang. You are 19 years old this year. Your father died in a car accident when you were 6 years old. Long Shuang Shuang's expression changed slightly and he said, everyone knows what you said, but it doesn't reflect what you are capable of. I thought for a while and continued, since these words cannot convince you, Miss Long, then I will talk about your father's death. Long Shuang Shuang's pupils trembled slightly, I'm warning you, don't talk nonsense. I pulled Long Shuang Shuang aside and whispered, of course I can't talk nonsense about this matter. The real cause of your father's death was not a car accident, but being killed by a ghost. Long Shuang Shuang's face became very ugly, and she whispered, I'm warning you, don't talk nonsense. I shrugged and said, you know best whether I have said anything nonsense, and the reason why your grandfather is suffering from nightmares is because of this evil ghost. The dragon's delicate bodies trembled slightly. She stared at me for a long time and asked, who are you? How did you know about this? My Long family has done a good job of keeping this matter secret, and no outsiders will know about it. I looked at Long Shuang Shuang and said, didn't you say you wanted me to show my hands? What I just said was all based on your face, and I did a little calculation. Long Shuang Shuang looked at me blankly and asked tentatively, do you really know yin and yang? I nodded and said, I understand a little bit. This is why Long Shuang Shuang is wary of me. She said to me, come in with me. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1802. Later, Long and I entered the Long family. The Long family courtyard is already extremely majestic from the outside, and even more magnificent when entering inside. In the courtyard, the 4 houses are independent and connected with each other by verandas, making the whole courtyard full of comfort and harmony. The layout of the courtyard is elegant, with clear axes and symmetry, showing its simplicity. I don't know much about the layout of the courtyard, I just know it's very big. Long Shuang led me to a room. There are many people standing outside this room. I looked closely and saw that these people were either wearing Taoist robes or long gowns. Some of them even wore sunglasses. No need to think too much, these people must be talented people recruited by the Long family. Dragon. These capable people are all very old, the youngest is only 40 years old. No wonder the security guard didn't let me in just now. I do look like a liar compared to these people at such a young age. Long Shuang led me towards the room. Before we entered the room, a middle-aged man blocked Long Shuang and I's way. This middle-aged man is tall, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, and a noble face. The clothes he wears are also expensive, and the watch alone is worth millions. Shuang, who is this? The middle-aged man looked at me and asked Long Shuang. Second uncle, this is. Just as Long Shuang was about to answer, she suddenly thought of something. She turned back to me and asked, "What's your name?" Lu Su. Long Shuang nodded and said to the middle-aged man, "Second uncle, this is Master Lu Sulu. He is here to look after Grandpa." Uncle Long Shuang was slightly startled, his eyes looking back and forth on me. After looking at it for a long time, Long Shuang's second uncle, Long Yongchang, looked at Long Shuang with a displeased look on his face and said, Shuang, this kid is about the same age as you, how can he help your grandfather? Give him some money and send him away. Don't come here to cause trouble. Long Shuang quickly whispered a few words in Long Yongchang's ear. After hearing this, Long Yongchang's expression suddenly changed. Are you telling the truth? Long Shuang nodded and whispered, "Second uncle, do you think I am joking? Only our Long family knows about my dad. How could he, a foreigner, know about these things?" Long Yongchang fell into deep thought because of Long Shuang's words. After being silent for a long time, Long Yongchang looked at me and said, "Boy, where did you learn from?" I thought about it and said, "It's not important to be a master. What's important is that I can solve your old man's nightmare." As soon as these words came out, the other Feng Shui masters, Taoist priests, and fortune tellers on the scene immediately showed disdain. Where did this young boy come from? He sounds so arrogant. That's right. If the old man's nightmare is really so easy to solve, how can he invite so many of us? That's right, kid, go back to where you came from. I didn't react at all to everyone's ridicule. If it were before, I would definitely reply with a few words. But there is absolutely no way I would argue or waste time over such a trivial matter. To me, their taunting seems like child's play. After so many things, I am no longer the passionate young man. My character has also been tempered many times and there is no need to argue with them. Long Yongchang hesitated for a while and said to me, "Since Shuang believes in you so much, then follow me in and take a look at the old man." End of chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 1803. I nodded and entered the room with Long Yongchang. The room is very large, just like the palace where the concubines lived in the Qing dynasty drama. There were several people standing in the main hall of the room who should be direct descendants of the Long family. When they saw me coming in, they all looked at me with contempt. Long Yongchang did not talk to these people, but led me to the old man's side. Long Fei's Hang, the old man of the Long family, is 80 years old. He is lying on the bed with a pale face and is dying. The wrinkles on his face looked very penetrating when squeezed together. Long Yongchang turned around and said to me, "This is my old man. He was haunted by nightmares half a month ago and has been sleeping until now. We have tried all our methods and can't wake him up. I nodded and came to Long Fei's hang. I looked at Long Fei's hang lying on the bed and frowned. Nightmare hauntings do lead to deep comas. But, Long Feizang's soul seemed to be separated from his body. I stretched out my hand and gently pressed my index finger on Long Feizang's forehead, and circulated the profound energy in my body to explore the old man's body. After some investigation, it turned out that the old man's soul was not in his body. At this time, I smelled a strange aroma. I looked around the room, finally setting my sights on the burning incense burner on the table. I frowned and went to the incense burner and opened it in front of everyone. My brows furrowed as I looked at the half-burnt spices inside. Long Shuang stepped forward and asked, "I asked you to come in to see my grandpa, not to see this incense." I looked back at Long Shuang and asked, "Who put this incense here?" Long Shuang was stunned and replied, "My cousin put it here." I nodded, already having the answer in my heart. I came to Mr. Long and said to everyone, "Your old man's soul has left his body. If you want him to wake up, you must find his soul. If you can't find it back, your old man will be a living dead." Long Shuang and Long Yongchang looked at each other, and immediately their brows knitted together. Long Yongchang said to me, "That's nonsense. My old man is haunted by nightmares. How could his soul be separated from his body?" I replied calmly, "If it wasn't for the soul leaving the body, why did your old man not wake up after being in coma for so long? If I'm not wrong, you should have used every method. Since you have used every method, why is your old man still lying here?" Long Yongchang's face turned pale when I said that. "Nonsense. Shuang. Leave this guy alone." Long Shuang came to my side, took my hand and walked out. "Why are you like this? I thought you were quite capable, but you actually said such nonsense. Even if my grandfather is really out of body, you can't say it in front of so many people, right?" Long Shuang pulled me to the courtyard. I looked around and saw no one around, so I said, "I know there are many people, so I didn't say some things in front of so many people." "What do you mean?" I whispered, "Someone in your Long family wants to harm your grandfather." "Nonsense." Long Shuang looked at me angrily. "Everyone in our Long family is of the same mind. We have always been a harmonious and happy family. How could someone want to harm my grandfather?" End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbo. Chapter 1804. I sneered and said, "It's just superficial. I just noticed the changes in expressions on everyone's faces in the room. Everyone had a look of indifference on their faces, and when they saw me entering, their eyes were filled with disdain and vigilance. To put it simply, everyone in the Long family doesn't care about your grandfather. If they want to say what they care about, it is naturally your grandfather's death." Long Shuang clenched his fists tightly, raised his fists and hit me. "Nonsense. Get out of here." Looking at the pink fist smashed down, I suddenly stretched out my hand and held Long Shuang's wrist. Long Shuang struggled desperately. "Let me go. Let me go." I looked at Long Shuang coldly. "Am I talking nonsense? I can only say that you are too naive. Think about it for yourself, who will inherit such a huge family business of your Long family in the future? Your second uncle? Or your third uncle? Or your seventh aunt and eighth aunt?" Long Shuang fell into silence after hearing my words. An ordinary family can have a bloody fight over inheritance. Let alone your Long family. I continued unceremoniously, "Miss, wake up. The only person you can trust now is me. If it's any later, your grandfather will be dead." Long Shuang bit her lips tightly and asked, "Believe you? Why should I trust you? I've only known you for an hour. How do you make me trust you?" I let go of Long Shuang's hand, shrugged nonchalantly, and said, it doesn't matter whether you trust me or not. You are old enough and have your own opinions on things. If you trust me, I will stay here. If you don't trust me, I'll leave now. Walk. Walking was impossible. Because I came here just to solve the Long family's affairs. Things about the Long family don't seem to have anything to do with me. But Grandpa said that Po Jungxing must help the Long family when he returns to the palace. Long Shuang lowered her eyes. After a while, she raised her head and said, I believe in you. I don't care what your purpose is. I just hope you can save my grandpa. As long as you can save my grandpa, you can do anything you want me to do. Even if you ask me to marry you. I stared at Long Shuang dumbfounded. Miss Long, how dare you? How dare you say such a thing? Why should I marry you? Long Shuang's pretty face flushed and said, no matter what people do, they have a purpose. If you don't want money, then you are lustful. That's why I said such things. I rolled my eyes and said, Miss Long, I have a wife. Even if I don't have a wife, I won't covet your beauty. Long Shuang was startled, and his beautiful eyes widened. Your words are too hurtful, aren't they? I, Long Shuang, am the eldest lady of the Long family, let alone rich. Do you think I look ugly? Long Shuang is still 19 years old today, and his words are somewhat childish. But if you think about it carefully, my age is not much different from hers. Ugly, not ugly, but still a lot worse than my wife. Long Shuang was so angry that my chest heaved violently. You. Why are you like this? I waved my hand towards Long Shuang and said, it doesn't matter how I am, you just need to know that I can save your grandpa. Okay, find a quiet place and I'll talk to you about this matter. Long Shuang took a deep breath to calm down the anger in her heart. She glared at me fiercely and said, follow me. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 1805. Then Long Shuang led me to a room. I went to the window and closed the curtains, then locked the door, and the whole room fell into darkness. What do you want to do? Long Shuang asked warily. I looked back at Long Shuang. I saw Long Shuang retreating step by step and retreating to the corner, looking at me warily. Sister, can your inner drama and brain circuits be normal? What can I do to you? Of course I have to deal with this matter. I said somewhat speechlessly. Then why are you drawing the curtains? I replied, you'll find out later. I came to the table and sat down, then I made the secrets with my hands and muttered words, and a piece of heavenly secret appeared in front of my eyes. I waved my hand casually, and an obscure spell appeared on the secret cylinder. I frowned, and the next second the secret of heaven turned into golden light and disappeared into the air. Long Shuang looked on in shock. You are a god. I looked at Long Shuang and said, I'm not a god, I'm just an ordinary person like you. Long Shuang said in a serious tone, if you were an ordinary person like me, how could you create a talisman out of thin air? I have seen those masters cast spells, and they all had to draw talismans, but you just pinched a few seals and talismans out. I smiled and said, I'm not on the same level as them. Long Shuang snorted softly. Humph, I said a few words to you and you're still out of breath. Okay, it doesn't matter how I get the talisman. What matters is your grandfather's business. I said to Long Shuang with a solemn expression, the reason why your grandfather is haunted by nightmares is entirely because of the incense burner in the room. Incense burner. I nodded and said, the spice burning in the incense burner is called Lihan incense. The soul-living incense will emit a strange fragrance when burned. Smelling this fragrance for a long time will bring back the most fragile memories in people's hearts, causing them to be haunted by nightmares. After a nightmare, Continuing to burn this incense will cause the soul to separate. Soul separation will have two consequences. The first type goes to the underworld and is reincarnated. Chapter 2, Wandering around the world as a lonely ghost, never able to find his way home. Long Shuang nodded in understanding, and she asked, "Then what is the use of the talisman you just made?" I replied, "The talisman just now is just a means of communicating with the underworld. I have to confirm whether your grandfather's soul is in the underworld first. If it is in the underworld, I can attract his soul." Long Shuang asked with some surprise, "If a person's soul goes to the underworld, doesn't it mean he is dead? Can you get the person's soul back in the underworld? Grab it? No need to rob it, it's just a matter of words. Now that the entire underworld is under my control, finding souls couldn't be easier for me." Just as Long Shuang and I were talking, a dark wind suddenly rose in the room, and a golden magic circle suddenly appeared on the ground. Immediately afterwards, the yin qi gathered towards the magic circle, and in the blink of an eye, an illusory figure appeared in front of me. "Ghost, ghost." Long Shuang was startled by the sudden appearance of the figure. She quickly hid behind me, her delicate body trembling. "Don't talk nonsense. This is Zhong Kui, one of the 4 judges of the underworld." Long Shuang poked his head out from behind me and asked tremblingly, Zhong Kui. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 1806. I nodded. Long Shuang continued to say in a trembling voice, "You, stop talking nonsense. Zhong Kui is a god. How can the person in front of you look so terrifying and be Zhong Kui?" I couldn't help laughing after hearing this. "Zhong Kui, did you hear that? People think you are ugly." Zhong Kui glanced at Long Shuang. Long Shuang was so frightened that he quickly retracted his head. "What she said is true. I was not born pretty. Zhong Kui has a leopard head with ringed eyes, an iron face and curled temples, and has a strange appearance. This kind of appearance is not too ugly, but it looks too fierce. In addition, the aura emanating from Zhong Kui's body was indeed terrifying." After Zhong Kui finished teasing himself, he turned to me and asked, "Your Majesty, why did you call me here? Emperor Fengdu is the apparent emperor of the underworld. But after the battle in the underworld, I am the real helmsman and emperor of the underworld. That's why Zhong Kui calls me Great Emperor." I said to Zhong Kui, "I want you to help me find a person and find out whether his soul is in the underworld." Zhong Kui replied, "Your Majesty, please tell me your name. I will go back and check it for you now." I told Zhong Kui the name of the old man of the Long family. After Zhong Kui remembered the name, he disappeared. I looked back at Long Shuang and said, "Okay, stop shaking. What's there to be afraid of?" Long Shuang stretched out his hand and patted his bulging chest in shock. "Of course I'm scared. I've never seen such a scary person." After Long Shuang said this, her expression froze, and she looked at me blankly. "He just called you His Majesty. If that person is really Zhong Kui, wouldn't you be the Lord of Hell?" Long Shuang didn't know much about the underworld. At the end of the day, she is just a normal person. In most people's understanding, the supreme leader of the underworld is the King of Hell. But in fact, Lord Yama is just one of the 10 palaces of Yama. The real ruler of the underworld was Emperor Fengdu. I nodded and said, "That's right." Long Shuang curled his lips and said, bragging, "If you were the Lord of Hell, I would be the Queen Mother." I rolled my eyes. "Believe it or not, it's up to you." About 5 minutes later, the magic circle appeared again, and Zhong Kui's figure once again formed a row in the air. Zhong Kui said to me, "Your Majesty, there is no such person in the underworld." "No." I frowned. Zhong Kui nodded and said in a very firm tone, "I just checked the Book of Life and Death. It is impossible for Long Fiazang's soul to come to the underworld before his life is over. Even if he comes to the underworld, I can still find out his whereabouts." I nodded and said, "Okay, I know, you go back first. If I need your help in any way, I will call you." Zhong Kui nodded and disappeared. Since Long Fiazang's soul is not in the underworld, it means that his soul has wandered away from the world and forgotten the way home. Lu Su, if my grandfather's soul is not in the underworld, where will it be? I pondered for a moment and said to Long Shuang, "Now go to your grandfather's room and secretly get his hair, and then I will cast a spell to bring back your grandfather's soul." Long Shuang nodded repeatedly and then left. The matters of the Long family are not big or small. As long as I can recall Long Fiazang's soul, then Long Fei's hang will naturally be safe. But I don't know why, I always feel that this matter is not that simple. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1807. Soon, Long Shuang took the hair. I put my hair back and did nothing. Long Shuang asked with some confusion, "Aren't you going to do a spiritual summoning? Why did you put your hair away?" I rolled my eyes and said, "You don't even know what time it is. It's broad daylight. How can I summon spirits?" "Yetu." Long Shuang replied. I said to Long Shuang, "Take me out and have a look. I have never been to such a big courtyard house." The reason why I proposed to go out and take a look was because I wanted to take a look at the feng shui of Long Mansion. Long Shuang nodded and said, "Okay, I will take you out, but you must not talk nonsense. I believe you, but others do not believe you. When you are kicked out, who will save my grandpa?" I smiled and said, "Don't worry about this." Then, Long and I both left the room. Long Shuang took me to visit the courtyard. To be honest, this courtyard is ridiculously big, with countless rooms. Except for the popular courtyards in the front, the courtyards in the back are lifeless and give people a creepy feeling. However, the uninhabited yard is not deserted. It seems that someone cleans it frequently. In addition, there is a paper man placed in each courtyard. The paper figure is wearing a Qing dynasty palace dress, and the decoration is lifelike. If I don't look closely, I actually feel like there is a person standing there. What are these paper figures doing here? I asked Long Shuang. Long Shuang replied, "Tonight, those magicians are planning to do a collective practice, saying that they will eliminate evil obstacles for our Long family. They also said that after completing the ritual, my grandfather will wake up." I sneered. Mr. Long's soul doesn't even know where it has gone, yet he's still doing this to exorcise evil spirits? How ridiculous. I came to the paper man and looked up and down carefully. This paper figurine is really well done. It should be from the hands of an expert. However, I always feel that this paper man is a little weird, but I can't tell what is weird. I pinched the paper man's skin hesitantly. I frowned and subconsciously took a step back. Long Shuang asked, "What's wrong?" I said solemnly, "Who stabbed this paper man?" Long Shuang replied, "It's a master my second uncle found." "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with this paper man?" I nodded and said, "There is a problem, and it's a big problem." "You're silent about the paper man's skin." After hearing my words, Long Shuang came to the paper man curiously, touched it with his hand and said, "Huh? Don't tell me, the skin of this paper man is just like a real person. Is it made of silicone?" I sneered and said, "Where is the silicone? It's obviously human skin." Long Shuang stopped stroking the paper man, then screamed and hid behind me. "You, don't scare me, I'm very timid. Why am I scaring you? Didn't you just say it yourself? The skin of this paper man is just like a real person. Silicone? Who uses silicone to tie up paper people? Long Shuang said with a trembling voice, then I have never heard of using human skin to tie up a paper man. I explained, in your eyes, does a paper maker just make paper figures and can't do anything else? Long Shuang nodded and said, well, doesn't the paper maker make a living by making paper figures? I shook my head helplessly and said, you know too little about yin and yang. End of this chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 1808. Ordinary paper makers really don't have much skills. All they can do is tie paper figures, paper horses, lanterns, and other things. However, some paper makers can make things look real and fake, and even make them come alive. Of course, paper makers have many techniques for making paper and use many materials, and human skin is just one of them. Long Shuang listened very carefully, with an expression as if he was listening to a teacher's lecture. Etc. Long Shuang interrupted. I have a doubt. If a paper man is made of human skin, the skin cannot be preserved so well. Even if it is kept in a refrigerator, the skin will change to some extent. Look at the paper man's skin. It looks like a real person, it can't be the skin that was just peeled off, right? I snapped my fingers and said, you are right, this is indeed a freshly peeled human skin, it cannot last more than an hour. After hearing my words, Long Shuang's pretty face instantly turned extremely pale. No. It's impossible, the human skin you just peeled off, isn't that killing people? Long Shuang asked in disbelief. I sneered and said, what does killing someone mean to your Long family? It seems that Miss Long, you still know very little about your family. I don't know much about the Long family. But I've been through a lot. Simple inferences can deduce the whole story. The Long family was rich and powerful in the capital, and killing someone with such a being was nothing at all. Long Shuang staggered a little. I patted Long Shuang on the shoulder and said, don't be surprised. It's normal that you don't know these things. You should be well protected by your family and have never seen those shameful things. Take me to see them where the other paper figures are. Long Shuang took a deep breath, nodded at me, and then led me to where the other paper figures were. 10 minutes later, I had determined the locations of all the paper figures. There are a total of 49 human skin figures, which are divided into 5 directions in the east, west, south, and middle of the Longjia courtyard. It was obvious that someone was setting up a formation. As for what formation to set up, I don't know. Because based on the feng shui of the Long family courtyard, there is no problem with the placement of these 49 paper figures. If you want to know what formation to set up, you have to wait for the stars to come out at night before making a judgment. Later, Long Shuang took me to the front yard, where a huge altar had been placed. Dozens of feng shui masters were discussing something a few days ago. When these feng shui masters saw my appearance, they all had expressions of disdain on their faces. Obviously, what happened when they just entered the Long family was already known to them. Why is this kid still here? That's right. The Long family is really magnanimous and allowed this liar to stay here. That's right. This kid doesn't know anything, and he just comes here to cheat. He also said that Mr. Long has lost his soul. Don't we know whether he has lost his soul or not? I sneered in my heart as I listened to the sarcastic voices of these people. Am I cheating? They are the ones who are really showing off and deceiving the ignorant. At this time, an old man wearing Taoist robes slowly walked out. A group of feng shui masters looked respectful when they saw the old man. Taoist Master Xianling. The old man nodded and said, what else do you want to say? One of the Taoist priests stepped forward and whispered a few words in Taoist Master Xuanling's ear. End of chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 1809. After hearing this, Taoist Master Xianling was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. You guys. Can't you give some tolerance and understanding to the younger generations? He is young and doesn't know much. We seniors should naturally guide him with humility, so that we in the Feng Shui world can have successors. When all the Feng Shui masters heard what Master Xianling said, they nodded in agreement. Immediately afterwards, Taoist Master Xianling walked towards me. Little brother, people have 3 souls and 7 souls, one is the heaven soul, the second is the earth soul, and the third is the life soul. There are 7 souls, one soul is the sky, the second soul is the spirit and wisdom, the third soul is the energy, and the fourth soul is the strength. Taoist priest Xianling began to teach me the common sense of yin and yang. I just rolled my eyes. Does this kind of common sense still apply to him? I already knew it. I have recovered most of my memory now, and there are countless spells, magic circles, and various secret techniques in my mind. Even all the magic techniques in the entire Feng Shui world are not as good as 1/10 of what I have in mind. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Who do you think you are? You dare to guide him? I was slightly startled when I heard this voice, and quickly followed it. I saw a familiar figure walking out of the crowd. The man was dressed in a white dress, as gentle as water, like a fairy who could not eat the fireworks of the world. No, she was originally an immortal too. Hangsuan. Why are you here? The visitor was none other than Lu Hangsuan. Lu Hangsuan walked towards me quickly. Lu Su. Why are you here too? I haven't seen Lu Hangsuan since the last time I said goodbye to Tishan. Lu Hangsuan was still as gentle as before, and the tenderness between her brows seemed to melt people. Who is she? I don't know, I've never seen it. But from the temperament point of view, it is not a simple role. I said to Lu Hangsuan, it's a long story. I'll explain it to you in detail later. Taoist Master Xianling looked Lu Hangsuan up and down, and then asked, Miss, what I just said was for his own good. He doesn't understand anything. What's wrong with me imparting a little knowledge? Lu Hangsuan looked back at Taoist Master Xianling and said nothing. At this time, a joking voice sounded. I told you to stop looking for pictures here. You are really unworthy of teaching him knowledge. Everyone looked around and saw a slovenly middle-aged man walking towards them. Master Ma! I exclaimed. Mr. Ma came to me and laughed at me, long time no see Lu Su. I looked at Mr. Ma with some joy. I never expected that I would meet Mr. Ma and Lu Hangsuan here. It's been a long time indeed. Why are you here too? I asked doubtfully. Mr. Ma waved his hand at me and said, we will discuss this matter later. I will help you deal with this annoying guy first. After saying that, Mr. Ma hooked Taoist Master Xianling's neck and said, Old Taoist Xianling, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't be embarrassed here because of your little Taoism. Do you know who he is? Taoist priest Xianling shook his head and said, the unknown person, of course I don't know who he is. Mr. Ma sneered and continued to ask, does the Taoist sect know? Taoist priest Xianling nodded. He destroyed it? As soon as these words came out, the scene instantly fell into deathly silence. Everyone was silent for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 1810. Mr. Ma, aren't you afraid that you might have lost your mind because of your retreat? How could a young man like him destroy the Taoist sect? Exactly. If he can destroy the Taoist sect, I will kill the entire heaven. Mr. Ma, I know you are all being careless, but what you said is too outrageous. Mr. Ma was not angry even when he heard the doubts from the people around him. He just sneered and said, if any of you are dissatisfied or don't believe it, you can have a discussion with him. After the discussion, you will know whether what I said is true. Mr. Ma came to my side and whispered, Xiao Suzy, show your hands and let me see your current strength. I looked at Mr. Ma, smiled bitterly, and said, can you please stop messing around? Mr. Ma rolled his eyes, stretched out his hand to hook my shoulders, and said, how can this be nonsense? We haven't seen each other for such a long time, and I'm very curious about how advanced you are now. I joked, how high? As high as a dozen floors. Mr. Ma looked at me questioningly and said, Lu Su, why do you like to brag like me after not seeing you for so long? Bragging? I'm not bragging, I'm just telling the truth. Mr. Ma smiled and said to all the Feng Shui masters, don't you believe it? Who dares to come forward and learn from me? All the Feng Shui masters looked at me and I looked at you, but no one had any reaction. After a long silence, a man stepped forward and said, Mr. Ma, we have to make an agreement first. You are not allowed to take action. That's natural. Mr. Ma nodded and said. With Mr. Ma's promise, those who were dissatisfied with me stepped forward and pointed at me and said, boy, I have long disliked you. As a junior, you are so arrogant. I want to learn from you today. How awesome. I was speechless when I heard the sentence. Where the hell am I so arrogant? I didn't say anything at all, okay. Wipe. This Mr. Ma has not changed at all, he is still so shameless. I originally didn't want to cause trouble, but people have already given me a challenge, so I can't be a coward. Since you want to ask for advice, then just come. The person who was yelling at me just now walked up to me and said to me, boy, I am a casual cultivator, and the thunder method is my best method. If this is the case, let's compare the thunder method. As soon as this person finished speaking, the others began to mock him with disdain. Are you still comparing yourself to Le Fa? Do you think too highly of him? How can a young boy use lightning? You'd better try it in another way. That's right. I'm over 80 years old, and I still haven't mastered the thunder method. The sound of everyone talking was like a swarm of flies buzzing in my ears. I was distraught to hear this. I directly stretched out my hand and held the magic formula with both hands. As the magic formula was finished, a burst of thunder suddenly sounded in the clear sky. Immediately afterwards, dark clouds appeared and enveloped the entire Long family villa. Before anyone could react to what was going on, light blue arcs of electricity appeared around me. The arc crackled and everyone hurriedly followed the sound. When they saw the thunder and lightning surrounding me, they all looked at me in disbelief with their mouths wide open. This is thunder. He really knows how to use thunder. End of chapter.